All right, we're live. So hot mic, screen's recording. It's gonna hear all your conversations, even in the back. I can hear them there too. I can hear everything. So keep that in mind while we're here. Okay, so your guys' tab should be closed, phone should be zipped up. Please, I'm gonna walk you through the new parts about 5.2. So while I was kind of experimenting around with how we could change this up, instead of making two separate HTML pages and kind of messing with our whole situation, instead, we're gonna create a div section. I've also added some links that'll help you guys research the different pieces of things that I need you to do for this assignment, but I've instead changed it from a separate section to a div. So using divs, we're gonna create a section in 5.2 that has regular text set to Verdana. We're going to use pseudo classes and pseudo elements to change the first letter of each paragraph to italicized Georgia. I know there's a lot of buzzwords, a lot of word soup, so it'll make sense here in just a second. And we're also going to make this anchor link to the SHS webpage do both get bigger and turn red when you hover over it. That's another use of pseudo classes and fonts. So if we pick up where we were yesterday by going file and then open folder and make sure that you have your second period web design unit 5 folder open, just like I did right here. Okay, close this, get all my stuff set up here. Our 5.1 currently looks a little something like this. 5.2, thank you. Just kidding. I'm just making sure you guys were paying attention. So our 5.2 naturally looks like this. It's a little large, so let me make it not so large. Okay, here we go. So we just got some basics kind of laid out. We have our paragraph, we have our elements header, and we also have a little link action happening here. I actually need to take that off because the first exercise in 5.2 does not require any links. So we're gonna get rid of that. So we talked a little bit about how to change the font family property. We've got a couple different options here in case our computer can't load the first one, then can't load the second one, can't load the third one. It can load the group at the very least. And that's about all the work that we've done thus far on our 5.2s. So the three things that are required for the first part of 5.1 or 5.2, the first exercise, make sure we have these finished off, is we need our regular text set to black Arial, which we actually have not done because I was demonstrating. So let me fix that real quick by naming the font. Let me get rid of these. Naming the font of Arial and then adding a quote. And then Arial is a sans serif font. So we're just going to have these two pieces of required CSS set to our entire body. And that's going to affect, let me close that tab. That's going to affect the entirety. Hi, all right, welcome back. The entirety of our visible page here, even the headers, even the whatever, by setting the body tag to be a font family of Arial. So that is going to be our all regular text set to black Arial. We need to also set our headlines to red Garamond. So that's two things that we need to add, two pieces of CSS we need to add to our 5.2 here. We're going into the style sheet and declaring that selector, telling the CSS what to focus on in the HTML. I used a headline level 1, so my selector is going to be an H1 and then a curly bracket. We know how to set the color to red for sure. We've done that a bunch. But the new property that I want us to change, because I want us to, the client, wants the headlines to be set to red Garamond, we need to set the font dash family property to be Garamond. But by setting the font family property to a value of Garamond, it is unfortunately not always enough for our computer. Sure, it'll work because VS Code's pretty smart and we're on HTML5, so we've been around the block a little bit. But we need a backup just in case Garamond can't load for whatever reason. So if I just Google Garamond, Google the name of my font here, you can see right here is a group of many serif typefaces. That is that grouping, that family font situation that I was talking about yesterday. The main two are going to be, the main two, excuse me, are going to be sans serif and serif. Garamond is a serif typeface. So after the name of the font, you're going to put the group of the font, which is serif, just in case Garamond can't load for whatever reason. So our output is looking something like this currently. We just have a regular paragraph set to Arial text, and we have this text-based element, a header, set to Garamond, because our H1 is a different selector from our entire body. Actually, I want to double check that real quick. Set that to paragraph instead of body, and let's see how it does. Yeah, okay, no, it's right. All right, so even though if I set a rule for my entire body, even though these are the same property with different values, because Garamond serif is both attached to a separate selector and comes after the body tag, it's not going to overwrite the previously written font family, which is what's going to give us the difference here. But anyway, the last thing we need for the first part of 5.2 is a block level element labeled code. So this is a div with a class of code. So I'm just going to my HTML here, hit enter, div period COED. And if you see the wrench icon, you can click on the wrench icon or you can hit enter, and it will automatically turn that into a start and end tag for a div with a class of code, and put your cursor nice and situated right in between the open and close, or the start and end tags. So I'm gonna hit enter, add a little placeholder text. This is the block labeled code. That, if I go to my output, it's normal, just text appearing, but it's inside of a div. So we can style that whole div in our CSS. I'm going to put mine on the right side, actually. Underneath my H1, I'm going to go div.code, just assigning the CSS with a selector and the class. Curly brackets, I'm going to set that color to be blue. And the last thing I need to change is the font to something called Lucida Console. So there's the name of the font in the quotes. I'm going to set the same property that I did. Good morning. The same property that I did for my H1 by going font-family. It's the same two properties, but different values. Okay. My font family is Lucida Console. And then if I have a curly bracket right here, go back to my output. VS Code, again, is smart enough to know that Lucida Console is what's going to happen here. But I need to give it a backup, and Lucida Console is not actually part of serif or sans serif. So if we Google Lucida Console and just kind of pop up some information about it, let's see what we can find here. That was not helpful. I'm looking for Lucida Console font family. It's going to tell us right here, published by Monotype. So mono, I'm going to assume that's probably a monospaced type font as compared to a serif or a sans serif. So I'm going to go comma, MONO, and then you can see the grouping, like serif, sans serif, for Lucida Console is going to be monospace. And so if we go back to our output, should look like this. If your exercise 1 looks like this, then you're in a good spot. So I'm going to wrap that up quickly because today's focused on exercise 2. And to create some separation, I'm going to add a little horizontal line right here by just typing HR and then hitting enter. And then underneath here, I'm going to add some labels like H1, enter, for exercise 2. Not 3, 2. And let's just see what that actually needs us to create. I think that's going to be red. Yeah, I will. Okay. So I'm going to change this real quick to be an H2 and make sure that that matches up with my CSS. If I go in here, H2. Okay. Quick housekeeping. So now our output is just like this. It's still going to be set to Arial font, but that's fine because we're going to be changing that up here in just a second. All right, so for exercise 2, instead of creating an entirely new HTML page, I'm just going to create a div section with div.ex2. It's going to be my label for exercise 2. Hit enter, and we're going to put all of our HTML structure inside of this exercise 2 little section on our page here. So let's focus on the structure first before we do anything with the CSS, before we do anything crazy with the styling. We need some regular text. We need the first letter of each paragraph, so we need at least 2 paragraph title or 2 paragraph elements. The first letter set to italicized Georgia, we'll ignore that, worry about it later, and a link to the SHS webpage that has 2 things happen when the condition of hover is met. Ignoring all the CSS, ignoring all the cool stuff that your client wants it to look like, we just need to get some text on the screen. So I'm typing P and then hitting enter. And then this is a paragraph for exercise 2. You can put whatever you want in here for EX2. And then I'm going to do that again by hitting P, enter. This is another paragraph for exercise 2. And then the last thing I need is going to be that anchor to the SHS webpage, that anchor link. Enter. It's going to give me the high ref automatically, put my cursor nice and situated in between the quotes. So I'm going to go to Google SHS. I've got my location service on, so I'm near Seattle. We're going to go to website for the Skyline High School. Maybe you've heard of it. Okay, copy that and paste that URL inside of our quotes for our high ref. Don't forget to add content in between your anchor start and end tags. I see a lot of the times the anchors aren't appearing, the links aren't working. It's because you have to have content like some text. Oh my goodness. There we go. Skyline web page. You have to have some text in between those tags in order for it to become content. So div class of exercise 2 with 2 different paragraph elements and an anchor. Your output should be looking something like this. Unstyled, besides the fact that it's being affected by the aerial tag from earlier. But other than that, exactly the same. Skyline webpage loads up. All good there. You can optionally, if you want, go after your A here and add a target and set that to blank. And so whenever you click on the link, it'll open it in a new tab as compared to opening it in line with whatever page it's on. Okay, so this is just the setup portion of our section that we're going to style here. Let's take a look first at this regular text set to Verdana. So we've already changed the font twice in this earlier exercise. It's exactly the same process, but we need to set a rule for div.ex2. Take advantage of the cascading part of CSS, the waterfalling part of CSS. I'm going to set my font dash family to be Verdana. Okay, and again, I need that backup. I'm not sure what family Verdana's in, or I'm not sure what family of font my client wants is in. So I'm just going to Google the font, and it's going to pop up right here that it is a sans serif typeface. That's the group that we're looking for. So after the font name, I'm going to add a little sans serif action. And then if I go back to div.ex2, it's going to look almost exactly the same, except now it's set to Verdana. Arial and Verdana are extremely similar fonts, so you'll just have to trust me that this is a different font than this. Actually, my blue Lucida console is not working. Figure out why that's. I'll figure that out later. Okay, anyway. So we have our font, our first thing met inside of this container. Inside of this exercise 2 div section, we have set the regular text to be Verdana. So if we want to change just the first letter of each paragraph to this italicized Georgia font, we need to be even more specific than a pseudo class and go as deep as something called a pseudo element. So there's a breakdown of how this pseudo element specific first letter works. We know that, or we're aware that pseudo classes like a:hover, 1:, and then the name after the colon is going to be the condition that needs to be met. If you have 2 colons, you're getting into something called pseudo elements territory. So if we're just trying to change the first letter of all of our paragraphs, our paragraph selector is going to go here, followed by : and then first letter. So we're just trying to affect the first letter of the paragraphs. This might affect the whole body, the whole page. That is fine. That's totally okay. So we're trying to change paragraphs. That's our first selector. We're going to move from general to specific. : and then by going : you can see there's a whole bunch of different lines here that are a whole bunch of different options here that you can take advantage of with pseudo elements. We just want the first letter right here. And then inside of our curly brackets, we have a hyper specific selector that's going to look for paragraph tags first. And then because of this : it's going to look for this condition of those paragraph tags, just the first letter. And then it's going to apply whatever CSS we style in here. So if we go back to 5.2, there's a breakdown for how to italicize text back from earlier this year. It is the font style property, but in case you needed a reminder, I've attached it to 5.2. We're going to go in here first and set that font dash style to be italic. First one up top. Okay, so now if we go to our output, it's going to look a little crazy. With each of the first letter of each of our paragraph elements, notice how it ignores the heading, is going to set to italics. Just like this. It's because we've added that hyper-specific condition that needs to be met, the first letter of every paragraph tag, and you can assign this pseudo class, or this pseudo element, to other selectors, to other things like that. You could do the whole body if you wanted, the first letter of every text-based element, right? There's options that you can work with here. Font style italic, we're good. Now we need to set it to the font family of Georgia. So we're gonna go font family, quotes, add the word Georgia, but Georgia is not gonna be enough for older computers to recognize what kind of font we want. So like, okay, for sure, I'm just gonna Google Georgia. Georgia, if I could spell it right. Come on, there we go. We got a lot of Georgia options, a lot more than just the font. We have the country, we have the state, we have the government site. We don't want all that mess. We want Georgia font specifically. And by Googling Georgia font, we can see that it is a serif typeface. So that is the group that it is a part of. We need to add that to our CSS just as a backup. So after the comma, you're gonna add a little serif like this. And that's gonna make the first letter of every paragraph on our page become italicized Georgia font. It's only the first letter though. So if I go in here and I add a, oops, that's the wrong button. If I go in here and I add a paragraph that is a ton of lorem, so I'm just type LOREM, click on that, Control S. Even though it's going to be a multi-line situation with multiple periods, multiple punctuation, stuff like that, it's only going to affect the first letter. It only ever affects the first letter of each individual paragraph tag. So you have a bunch of paragraph tags, you're going to have a lot of italicized Georgias, but it only affects the first letter. I'm going to delete that real quick. All right, so the last thing that we need to do is experiment with a little bit of a pseudo class for our anchor here so that it turns red and gets bigger when we hover over it. So if you remember back from the demo I did earlier this week, we're going to use a pseudo class to set some type of condition that when a condition is met, the CSS that applies, or the CSS that's contained, is going to apply. So if we set our rule for all anchors, set them to the color of red, and we set that font size to be something crazy like 300%, font dash size. We're going to set that to 300%. Okay, that is not going to affect our thing conditionally. It's going to go en masse, generally speaking, and set our anchor to whatever CSS we have applied. We need to get more specific in our selector in that first portion right here by adding a colon. It's going to pop open a bunch of different options. You can see the 2 colons are going to be pseudo elements, but the single colons are going to be pseudo classes. We want hover. So we have host, we're in the H's, it's alphabetical. We're going to go hover. So now that we've set a condition, now that we use the pseudo class to set some kind of specific that needs to be met, it's going to look like a normal link until I hover over it. It's going to apply whatever CSS happens inside of there. So here's what my CSS is looking like for assignment 5.2, both exercises. If you want to check it against yours, remember this video is recorded, so you can reference it later on. Here's what mine's looking like. I'm going to shift to the HTML, slowly but surely. So speak now or forever hold your peace as I move away from this style sheet. Okay, here's what my HTML looks like. All contained within my body. Check this against yours. Yours is going to have different content inside of the actual elements themselves, or it could be exactly the same as mine. Both works as long as you have your classes assigned correctly and your nesting assigned correctly. You are good.
What is the target equals blank?
Target equals blank opens it in a new tab, and you don't have to do that part. Okay, so now how do we actually submit these folders for grading, for grades, for all that type of stuff? I'm going to close out of this, this, and we're going to go to our modules. So since everything is contained, there's your Zoom recording, sorry. Since everything is contained within our Unit 5 root folder, if I go into here, you can see my HTML pages and my index page, as well as all my SRCs and all of my styles and stuff. If I go back one level to my whole second period web design folder, everything that we've done for this unit is contained in this root right here. So all you need to do is right click on that with the checkbox selected. If you can't see your checkboxes, remember it's view and then item checkboxes right here. With your folder selected, or checked, I mean, you can right click or middle finger click and then go to send to, and then go to compressed zipped folder. Once you do that, it'll automatically pop up right down there. Hit enter, and that's how you're going to submit both 5.1 and 5.2. You will notice that if we go down to Unit 5, there's a submit Unit 5 roots here for 0 points. Your points will come out of the actual Canvas assignments themselves. So you'll submit all of your stuff here. I'll unzip it all and go through student by student, grading in the entire unit. And I'll give you your scores on 5.1 and 5.2, or whatever number of assignment it is on Canvas. And then this will just stay out of 0 points. So this is where we're going to upload our new root, or our new zip that we just created. Click on upload. Make sure that I'm in my second period web design folder. This is first period, so I need to go back one level to second period web design. Look for my Unit 5 zip, or my Unit 5.zip. Click on that. Wait for it to load, submit it. You have just turned in both 5.1 and 5.2 by submitting the entirety of your Unit 5 root to this spot. The last thing that I actually, I forgot to check before I submitted was that my all of my HTML are linked together on my index page. They are. So you want to make sure that before you zip it, before you send anything in for me to grade, that you have both 5.1 and 5.2 anchors on your index page or your dashboard or your home page or whatever you want to think of it as. You have to make sure that I'm able to access it from your index page, because you're only submitting the one folder this time, the one zip, I mean. So that is how you submit stuff. This is the end of Unit 5. It's a much shorter one compared to Unit 4. We'll do Unit 6 next week, which is just expanding on some of this stuff. And then after break, we're going to get into JavaScript and kind of put a pin in HTML and in CSS. So this is what my index page looks like. That's what my 5.1 looks like. That's what my 5.2 looks like for the HTML. And close all that. Here's what my 5.1 style looks like. Here's what my 5.2 style is looking like. And we've got everything all contained within a Unit 5 root like this. So the rest of today is making sure that you zip and submit your Unit 5 by the end of class. Finishing up 5.1, 5.2, or any other questions you have maybe for 4.7 or related. We're just going to get all squared away so we can start fresh next week on Unit 6. Does anybody have any questions before I close up our lecture time? Okay, I'm going to end this, process it, and I'll get right back to y'all. Thank you for listening.